I think we're live. We may be live. Stream will start soon. I don't know. How you doing, Dan?
Hello. I am doing great. It's great to be here.
Yes, we were just in London last week in the cold, and then we come back here and we're cold. Yes. Okay. So I think we're live. Yes, I see myself. Great. Okay. So so Dan, you're the PM for Blazor. This is the Blazor show. I'm going to start with some community links as we do. Some of them are Blazor-ish, some are not. So let me just jump right into that. Excellent. I'm starting with a wonderful post by Ben Adams. Ben is Mr. Performance. He's done all kinds of stuff on Kestrel. He's done some previous posts on ASP.NET Core and Kestrel, just performance over time. And so this one is really neat. Here he's talking about saturating 10 gigabit Ethernet at 7 million plus requests per second. He goes way in depth, talks about other servers. He also talks about the ability that you can run Kestrel as an edge server. It makes Barry Dorans cry, but that's part of the fun. And then he also digs into, some people will say, well, raw performance is great, but if your database is slow, then, you're no good. And he talks about some things that have been going on there lately too. The Postgres performance, fortunes. So, talking about that it's not just MySQL, so it's not just the kind of raw benchmark stuff. It's actually the actual, building out entire applications. Talking about benefits, what they're seeing at Age of Ascent, just digging in, all this kind of stuff. Talking about production readiness, ASP.NET Core 3, and then some of this neat stuff, keep reading because there's neat stuff towards the end, reduced allocations, and also platform intrinsics.
Massive post.
Yes. So, this is wonderful. Oh, and talking about the performance dashboard. So this is neat. This is in your area, the ASP.NET team area. So this is neat. I think it's just crazy. People like really read into this stuff. Someone zoomed in on this and found that there was Canadian money sitting on top of this refrigerator, and they were like concerned about that. So yeah. Yeah. So anyhow, just great post, lots of fun. Awesome to just continue to see this this performance going through the roof over the years. I don't know, when you've got 100%, where do you go from there? We need faster internets, I guess.
Yeah.
So, good stuff. This is neat. This is out on the Azure Docs. This is in the Learn stuff, and there's new content here. This is build a web API with ASP.NET Core. And it's actually like an interactive thing where you go through and build it out. So I don't know, adding all this up, this is like half hour, 40 minutes. You can do it 45 minutes. So this is neat. If you haven't played with this Learn content, it's really neat. It's interactive. It's a cool way to kind of go through, and you can earn points and have fun. This is cool. This is from Brady and Scott Addy. They built out this hosting an ASP.NET Core SignalR in a background service. So this is a nice thing, the support for background services in ASP.NET Core. And this is an area that hadn't really been well documented before. So here they go through how to wire this up during startup and just all the kind of stuff, reacting to events from background services. So it's a nice short documentation thing, but it's nice to see this written up. Cool. Also on the SignalR thing, Karthik writing about streaming in ASP.NET Core. So it's easy to do a hub for kind of interactive communication. Stream is good for if you're streaming content out. So you've got chunked data that you're sending. So here he goes through doing that. So kind of a nice nice article here and interactive thing at the end where it's showing the streaming data. Okay, so this is another one in the series from Shahed. He's talking about EF core relationships in ASP.NET Core. So this is a meaty post, very, very helpful. This is timely for me. I was just working through some stuff for the workshops, ASP.NET Core app workshop. So here he's building out an application with learning resources. He's working with YouTube content, all that. So here he's building out many-to-many, all kinds of different relationships. So he does, one-to-many, builds up to many-to-many. And already off of this, there's been some questions on Twitter and people, asking more about it. So, and he's got some great references at the end too, talking about Julie Lerman's great stuff and just great post. All right, this is neat. Andrew Locke, here he had a user question on speeding up first hit on a website by pre-building services. So he goes through and does this. His first kind of take at it, he just loads up singletons, and it was kind of underwhelming. He shaved off only 26 milliseconds, so not that great. Then he goes through and takes another run at...
Every millisecond counts, John. Every single one. Time is precious.
Well, wait till you see this. He goes through and he builds all services, and then he gets a more massive, let me see, 117 milliseconds shave.
Mm-hmm.
So
there you go.
Yeah. So this is interesting. This is kind of a new experiment that he's built out here. Kind of interesting to see. I'm hearing some background noise. I don't know. If Galnez is listening, I think they may need to mute on her side.
Yeah, it's not me.
Let me see if I can mute Galnez. I don't think I can. Galnez, you're trouble. All right. Okay, this is from Jürgen, and he's talking about customizing ASP.NET Core Web Host Builder. So this is setting up secrets in Web Host Builder. So, of course, if you've got Startup, it's easy to configure secrets using, using your standard configuration. But if you've got something spinning up in Startup, how do you do that? So he kind of spells out how to do that using. Yeah, so this is getting louder and louder. I don't know if you're hearing a lot of background noise.
Yeah, it's like getting worse.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, folks.
Galnez, hello.
Hey, I'm in here. What's up?
We're hearing a lot of background noise from your side, I think.
Oh, you guys are probably hearing it, not the streamers. But
Oh, okay.
but, that's fine. I'll shut it down.
All right. Okay, cool. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, yeah. So anyhow, this is helpful to know more about that. So if you are doing something where you're not using a whole startup and you're just using using Kestrel, you can configure secrets there as well. It is wonderfully quiet now. I can concentrate.
Oh, yes.
So Damien and David did two talks. One that David shared his slides for this. This is scaling ASP.NET Core applications. So this is a meaty, deep technical presentation here, and all the slides are there. So that is neat. I'm not going to take you through it, but it will make you feel either smart or stupid. There's a lot of stuff. This is based on things that they run into in helping customers that are running into applications that are not scaling. So yeah, a lot of good stuff. And of course, this is from NDC London. The actual talks will be out soon. They're all recorded, and so we'll share those when those come out. Also at NDC London, we were both there, partly for workshops. So we updated the ASP.NET Core app building workshop for ASP.NET Core 2.2. That included new stuff with data. It included updates for identity. Some cool things. We actually use scaffold identity now. We updated for Bootstrap 4. So a lot of stuff that's we've been building this application out for years, and it was cool to kind of delete a lot of code. But because part of what we do with this, part of why Damien's told me he likes doing this workshop is he sees what the pain points are in building real world multi-tier applications, and then tries to see how we can make ASP.NET Core better to make, app building better. So so it's cool as we go through and build the applications out to kind of see how that evolves over time and the app gets easier to build. You were there.
I was there.
So,
look at that.
Yes.
Blazing pizzas.
So this is a brand new, hot off the pizza oven.
Hot out of the oven, freshly baked with that sort of crisp crust on the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, so amazing. This is a brand new workshop. If anyone wants to learn the latest in Blazor, this is as fresh as it gets. So I don't know if these are not intentional jokes. These are just
You want to find that? There's even a short URL for that. You can go to aka.ms/Blazor workshop, and that'll take you right to that GitHub repo. And you can
put that
try
in
out that would be a great idea. Great, yeah, I will do that.
Let
look.
me do this. HTTPS aka.ms/Blazor.
Blazor workshop. All one word, no hyphen. There you go. That's it. Oh. That's the magic. But what's the point of putting it there? Like if you put it there, then they're already there.
Yeah, but people can save this and share it around now.
Oh, okay.
Like, hey, I got this. let me share this with my friend.
That's a full 2-day workshop where we go through and build a pizza store app using Blazor and WebAssembly and Razor components
and a real-time map.
With a real-time, yeah. And if you watch, look at that. We decided it's basically drone pizza delivery because that driver just goes like he's going to that location. Plowing through buildings.
Why not drone pizza? That's it. It's the future. Excellent. Okay, I got some more fun Blazor links. So this is from Vaktanji. I've got 2 cool things from him. One is we've shared several of his things over time. So he's been sharing them under Lipusa, I guess. I don't know how to say it. But so he's got a YouTube channel, which you pointed out to me. He also recently shared this. This is a Blazor spreadsheet. I don't even. This is just crazy talk.
No, you don't need Office 365 anymore.
So
Google Docs, step aside.
Look at that. That's 25 plus 1. Let's make this 25 plus 4.
Oh.
And it updated all these other things. It's just, I don't even know what's going on. So that's neat. Mikhail, here he's got an event aggregator. So this is for PubSub. I'll be honest, over time, as people are building out more advanced applications, and then these different application patterns start to emerge, it gets harder for me to keep up. But this is really interesting and exciting, I think, as people are building out these different components. Here, this is an event aggregator and building out PubSub here.
Cool.
So,
yeah.
Neat.
One of our principles with Blazor is we try to be enabling but unopinionated. We want to, we don't want to dictate which patterns that you have to use for component coordination or state management. We want to kind of leave that up to the community and the ecosystem to figure out. So it's great to see stuff like this where someone's like, well, I like this pattern. Let me try and implement that on Blazor. Let's see what that looks like. And you can do it. You can see how it feels. But you're not locked into it. You have the flexibility to try this pattern or whatever pattern you like.
Yep. Cool. All right, Hisham showing integrating JavaScript logging with Blazor. So this is there's advanced support for JavaScript logging all through different browsers, and so here he's using interop and logging out through the JavaScript APIs from Blazor.
Oh, cool.
And then in the end, you can write specific things out and stuff. So of course that's something where interactive debugging and stuff over time the browser developer tools get better with WebAssembly, but you can't beat a log sometimes. So there you go. So this, of course, this is posted by this Dan guy. Yeah, and I think I have this, and that was just this. Yeah, so this is how I transition over to you. I think here's this post you wrote, and some of the stuff in here is about Razor components and all that.
Amazing things. Yeah, we shipped Razor components in ASP.NET Core 3.0 Preview 2. It's in the box. It's in the SDK now. That's
Wow.
super cool. So what does that mean? Like, let me share my desktop.
So let's switch over to you. And I don't know if Golnaz does that or what happens. And
Do I just do that? Is that it?
if you share your desktop, hopefully it works. Of course, there's a screen delay. Make sure in case you're like cursing.
I'm showing the blog post. It should be the same thing. It's like it was a seamless transition to what you were showing.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to assume it's working. You let me know if I need to switch anything up. But yeah, so we shipped .NET Core 3.0 Preview 2, which of course had a whole bunch of updates to ASP.NET Core. But one of the big ones was that Blazor components are now in the box. Blazor components is basically the Blazor component model that we have now integrated into ASP.NET Core. So it is now part of the framework. And in this release, what you can do with Blazor components is you can now host them server side. Now I guess we should probably step back and just ask, like, well, what really are Blazor components? Well, Blazor components are individual pieces of UI. It's for client-side UI development. You can compose them. They can handle user events. And it gives you a way to build client-side web UI logic completely in .NET without having to write any JavaScript. That's really what it does for you. And they are flexible in that they can be hosted both client-side and server-side. I think I got even a little diagram down here. Let me pull that up. Yeah, these guys. Okay, so if you've been following along with Blazor, you've probably seen the picture looks like this. With Blazor, we run the Blazor components directly in the browser on a WebAssembly-based .NET runtime. So you have WebAssembly, that's just part of the browser. Every modern browser supports this new low-level bytecode for the web. And then we wrote a .NET runtime in WebAssembly that can then run .NET code directly in the browser. And we then wrote a UI framework based on Blazor components that we call Blazor that allows you to write rich, modern client-side web apps using nothing but .NET. But the cool thing about these Blazor components is that the way they work is they render, when they run their rendering logic, they render into like an in-memory representation of the UI, like of the DOM, for example. And then the framework takes care of looking at what the components are saying that they want to render, doing a diff of what was already rendered previously, and then applying only the diff to the actual underlying UI layer, like in this case, the browser DOM itself. And because those two things are decoupled, you have component rendering logic, and then the thing that actually applies the UI updates. That means that the components can actually run in whatever process you want. They can run directly in the browser like this with a Blazor app, but they can also run in a completely other process. For example, you can run them on the server, which is what we're doing with ASP.NET Core 3.0. You run your Blazor components server side in 3.0. That's where your rendering logic actually executes in response to any UI events that get sent from the browser to the server. And then when the server has figured out how the UI should be updated, it calculates the diff and then sends that back down to the browser to then be applied by the framework. And that's what we call ASP.NET Core Blazor components. Blazor components hosted server side. So that's what we're shipping in 3.0. It's there. It's in the box. It's in its first preview for you guys to try out.
Now, when I'm looking at this diagram of, because of the way you're saying, like it can get it from anywhere. Like for instance, I could have a web page. Do I have to be, can I be communicating with more than one server? Could I be shipping HTML from one server and then it's actually going SignalR to a SignalR hosted service or something?
So we are using SignalR for the connection. Like this is a connected model. You're kind of treating the browser as like this sort of almost like a dumb terminal, right? Like it's just your UI layer. It's a thing that knows how to render a DOM. All the user events are being sent to the server to be handled, and all the rendering logic computations is happening server side. So because it is a connected model and we're using SignalR for that connection, it has all the same constraints as SignalR. Like you do need to, I think basically need to have sticky sessions for how those connections get managed. Fortunately, like we have a whole service in Azure that helps you deal with all those connections. We have the Azure SignalR service. That can help you with scaling out all those connections for all your connected clients to like, tens of thousands of connected clients, and to make the scale out really easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we show how to do that? Like the scale out and stuff with Blazor?
Yeah, with Razor components.
Excellent.
Absolutely. In fact, I might even. Do I have an app? This one, yeah. I did a.
I'm sorry for pushing you off script, but this is your chance to shine. You can just off the cuff dazzle us.
Hopefully this just works. Let me pull out this little piece of code I just had in my pocket. Yeah, so Razor Components is absolutely designed so that it can work with the SignalR service, because we know that scale out scenario is going to be really important. So it looks like how you would use the Azure SignalR service with any ASP.NET Core SignalR app. You basically add the Azure SignalR Service SDK to your project, and then there's two lines of code that you need to add. You need to add the Azure SignalR Service services in your configure service method, and then in configure you wire up the Azure SignalR middleware to point at whatever hub it is that you want to host. So I'll show you the code here. So I've already, and I apologize, my machine's obviously slowing down to a crawl as I open up more and more Visual Studio instances. But here, there's the Microsoft Azure SignalR. That's the Azure SignalR Service SDK that I just went ahead and added as a NuGet package. This is in a Razor Components app. And then up above in my configure services method, you just say add Azure SignalR. Along with the Azure the normal SignalR services. And then down below, we're saying, I want to use Razor components. Like I'm going to do my normal Razor component thing. We have this currently. So this code will probably go through some iteration as we move through the release. But right now, what you do is you tell Razor components, hey, don't host the hub directly. I'm going to do it myself. I have a different way I want to host the hub. And this hub, of course, will be named to like Components Hub or something like that instead of Blazor Hub. There's some Blazor renames that didn't quite make it all the way into Preview 2. But then here's where you actually set up the service. You say use Azure SignalR, and then you say which hub that you want to be hosted. And then that will then set up this sort of negotiation where as clients connect to the app, they will get redirected over to the Azure SignalR service. It then handles all the connections coming in, and then it multiplexes those connections back to your app so that you don't have to handle all of that load. And it's as simple as that. So it's just a couple lines of code and a package.
Okay, so the kind of, in case it's like hard to follow, because there's the Blazor with the WebAssembly thing, and then there's also the Blazor hosted on the server. And the nice thing here is I don't need any special support in my browser. Anything that can connect to SignalR can support it, right?
Yeah.
And then okay.
Yeah, exactly. So the nice thing about Razor components running on the server is that it has much less burden on the browser, on the client itself. The browser doesn't even need to know how to run WebAssembly. Like literally, we're just downloading some JavaScript into the browser, so some infrastructure JavaScript that we provide that sets up the SignalR connection. It knows how to send the browser UI events up to the server, and it knows how to handle the UI diffs that are being serialized and sent back down to the browser so that they can be applied. And that's all it's doing. So it's a very thin client. Like, I literally think of it as like a dumb terminal to a mainframe. It's just acting as a presentation layer. All the guts and the smarts are happening server side in this model. And so that has pros and cons, right? Like the benefits of this model are, well, you have much fewer requirements for the client. So it works on a variety of clients, including older browsers. The startup performance of the app is actually really good. Like the only thing you need to download to get the app up and running is that little bit of JavaScript. So the app actually starts up very fast. All of your code stays server side. It's kind of been interesting as we talk to people who've been following along with Blazor and Razor components. There's a set of them that are like, I'm not really comfortable with my DLLs actually going all the way down to the browser. Like, does that mean people will be able to see them and be able to disassemble them and see my code? And the answer is yeah. I mean, that's how web apps work. Of course they can. And they're like, oh, well, hold on. I mean, I have IP in there that I actually don't want to disclose in that way. Well, server side, Razor components on the server gives you a model for handling that, where you can just run all of the code on the server. It never leaves the server. The only thing that's going down to the client is UI-related traffic. Actually having an example of that. This was a demo that Steve Sanderson gave at Orodev, and we showed it again at NDC recently. The idea, this is a Razor components based app. It's going to run server side. I think do I already have it running? Yeah, I already got it running. So if we refresh this app and make sure it's
this is if. By the way, if anyone's like kind of watching, but also sort of like checking sports or something, you got to watch this. This is one of my favorite demos I've ever seen.
This is a fun little demo.
Eyes on the screen.
If I see if we can see the wire size of this app, because this app is literally all really running server side. You can see it's even saying I've set up a WebSocket connection to the server. If we look at what gets downloaded here, normally for a Blazor application, you're talking a couple megs to get everything down. This app is only 101 kilobytes transferred. I don't know if you could see that on the bottom. So it's pretty lightweight. There's not much coming down to the browser. That's because everything's running server side. There's a connection that's set up to the server where all the UI logic is being run. And the idea with this app is well, the way Steve pitched it is, imagine your management comes to you and they tell you, we figured out that it's best for our business if we have good reviews, like good comments and reviews for our products. And so what we want to do is we want to use like sentiment analysis so that we can filter out all of the bad reviews and only have good reviews on the server. Like, okay. And so what this app does is it trains, it's already trained an ML.NET model for doing sentiment analysis, like a real ML.NET model. If we go look on the application, the .app project, that's the Razor component part of the app. And if we go looking in here, I think it's in shared. Yeah. No, actually, let's go look at the page first. So the review page that we were just seeing before. So it's got a text area. And then on input, so every keystroke, it's calling this update score method written in C#. And in here, it's calling into this sentiment class to do a prediction, to calculate whether this is a good or bad sentiment. And we can look at what the code for that looks like. Here's the sentiment class. And there is this sentiment.zip file. That's the actual trained ML.NET model that's used to doing the sentiment analysis. And it when you do the prediction, it calculates a number between 0 and 1, where 0 is like, just utter despair, like, complete misery, a horrible state, wherein 1 is like the ultimate human ecstasy or whatever. So that's what this is doing. And of course, this sentiment model, this is data that we use to train this thing. This is proprietary. Like, we don't want to send that down to the client. We got to keep it on the server where it's part of our key IP assets. So that's what this app is doing. Every time I click a type of keystroke, it gets sent to the server, it calculates sentiment, and then sends it back down. And hopefully this slider down here will shift based on the sentiment. So for example, this is horrible. I hate it. I will never use it again. You get the idea, right? Like where that's kind of negative sentiment, whereas this is great. I love it. I will use it, and then we get good sentiment. So
I'm surprised that when you were going off on it, it still gave you a 12%. Like, I don't even know. I guess you need profanity to like get down to 0.
Yeah, I mean. There may have been. I think the ML.NET model in this app is maybe a little bit naively trained. It probably could be if we were more experienced with training models, we probably could do a little bit better. But you at least serves to give you the idea of what this technology can be used for. So none of that calculation of the sentiment happened client side. It was all done on the server. So that's kind of one of the benefits of server-side Blazor. Another benefit is, or Razor components, is that you get to take advantage of .NET. Like you have full .NET Core that your Razor components are running on. So you can use any dependency. You can use the full debugging because you're running on just a normal .NET Core runtime. And actually, I haven't done this. Let me try. If I go back to that app. And let's see if we can set a breakpoint right there. And this should work, right? We're running on .NET Core. We can debug .NET Core. It's running server side. So we know we have some stuff where we can debug .NET code when it's running in the browser, and we're working on making that a whole lot better. But still, it's a little rough right now. But since we're running on just normal .NET Core here, we should be able to debug however we want and right from Visual Studio. So let's get the app up and running again, this time running under the debugger. And then supposedly, if I start typing into the text box, I should be able to hit my breakpoint. Of course, it's really a little slow. Not sure what's going on. Give it a second.
As you're typing this, David Pine's asking, is this open source or where he can find this demo?
This demo? So we're actually working with the ML.NET guys right now to try and make this demo public.
Okay.
I think that when Steve's actually been asked that a bunch of times. The sentiment model is actually trained really naively in this app, and so he hasn't published it yet because Steve, Steve's a perfectionist, right? Like he does quality work, and he's like, I don't want to like embarrass ML.NET with this completely garbage trained model. So he's working with them to actually get a decent sentiment model put together so that we can make it public. But if I just start typing and boop, so now I'm over in the debugger inside of Visual Studio in my Razor component, just like you expect, right? Like you could do this in MVC views, you could do this in Razor pages, you can do it in Razor components here because we're running server side. We are actually working on enabling exactly the same experience for client side Blazor. That's not available yet, but I know Steve, he showed an early sort of prototype-like demo of it at NDC. Unfortunately, I'm not set up to do that, but if you want to go see that in action where you're debugging client-side .NET code running in the browser on WebAssembly from within Visual Studio, go check out Steve's Blazor NDC talk as well. Yeah, so that's Razor components running server side, and you can use it today. So I'm going to close. Let me shut this.
I'll talk while you're doing the computery stuff there, but that is an important thing that you're pointing out too, is that debugging is definitely a simpler process, debugging like server-side SignalR code versus debugging WebAssembly in a browser is a little bit harder these days, right? So that is a nice...
Yeah, currently it's much harder to debug into WebAssembly. We do plan to address that, but for right now, the WebAssembly-based debugging story is a little rough around the edges. So actually, a lot of people, when they're building Blazor apps, they'll actually set up their app in sort of this dual mode where they can flip it between client-side Blazor and server-side Razor components. And the reason why they do that is because when they're developing it, sometimes it's convenient to be able to, step through the code and use all the debugging tools in Visual Studio. We'll run server-side Razor components in order to do that. And then when they actually go to publish the application, they flip it back to Blazor because they want it to be have all the capabilities of a client-side web application, support for offline and all those things. Okay, so but let me show you how you can get going with Razor components in .NET Core 3.0. So I've already installed the .NET Core 3.0 Preview 2 SDK. So if I pop up a command prompt here, and if we just do like a .NET version, that should show us a 3.0 SDK version. Yeah, that's the one. So that's the 3.0 SDK version that you want to see, 10184. Okay, and once you've got that installed, you're also going to want to get Visual Studio 2019, the latest preview. I believe it's like preview 2.1 is what they just pushed out. And if you have those two things, you're ready to go with Razor components. And so to create your first app, you create a new ASP.NET Core web application, because we're going to create an ASP.NET Core Razor components app. What should we call this? Let's call this Razor components app. What? Do I have one of those already? Let's see. Looks like I don't. Good. Okay. And then in the File New Project dialog, in addition to creating a vanilla Razor Pages web app and MVC web app, there is now a Razor Components template, and that's just a web app that is built using Razor Components. So let's go ahead and create that, and see what we got. Okay. So kind of like what we saw with that sentiment analysis app, you'll end up with a solution that has two projects. You'll have a .server project. That's just a normal ASP.NET Core web app. It's the thing that's really hosting all the Razor components. And then there's a separate .app project. And that's where all of our Razor components are actually live. Here we have, our our traditional counter, fetch data, and index.cshtml files. There they are. The reason why currently we have this code in a separate project is kind of interesting. There's some technical reasons, first of all. One is that these are your component files, right? These CSHTML files. They're Razor files. They're Razor components. But because Razor components actually compile in a different way than like Razor pages or MVC views. And so because they compile differently, we put them in a separate project so that it's easy to tell, like, oh, okay, these CSHTML files are going to compile this way. Those CSHTML files that are like your Razor pages and views will compile the traditional way. So that's one reason why they're in a separate project. It's actually for that reason that in the future we plan to start using a different file extension for your Razor component files. We'll move to .razor so that we can really easily know that these are Razor components and not MVC views or pages. And that will allow us actually to put them directly in the ASP.NET Core app. We can put them all together.
Yeah, so I had a question on that. Here, this is set up for if I'm building an application, I've got a server and a component. What if I was building out like a whole component suite, or I wanted to build out like a component I wanted to distribute, like a spreadsheet, for instance, right?
Yeah. So you can build. Razor components are just classes. Like when we take this counter.cshtml file and we build this project. I don't know if it already built. Let's see if it already built. When we build it, the Razor compiler will first turn the CSHTML file into a bunch of C#, and it's just a class. And that class gets compiled into the assembly for that project, and then you can distribute it however you want. So you can build just normal class libraries that contain components using these CSHTML files and the Razor SDK, and then build them and distribute them. You can package them up as NuGet packages and share them with the world. We actually have a whole bunch on the Blazor site. If you go to blazor.net/community, you highlighted some of the some of the things our folks in the Blazor community have been doing. But in this libraries section, there's actually a whole bunch of libraries here that are actually just normal Blazor component libraries. Like here's a Blazor grid. Someone wrote a bunch of Bootstrap 4-based Blazor components that you can just add these as NuGet packages to a Blazor or Razor components app, and then use those components just as like you would a library, like another API. We have a template for creating these types of component libraries. It doesn't yet ship in Visual Studio. Like we didn't get it into this Preview 2 release. We do plan to get it into a future release. So by the time .NET Core 3.0 ships, there will be a Razor component class library template that will have it all wired up and ready to go to create Razor component libraries. In the meantime, there is a Blazor class library template that basically has the same infrastructure that you can use. In fact, I can show that real fast. Let's hop over here. Let me go. I should probably make this a little bigger so you can see. Let me make up the font size. Boom. Okay. You see that all right? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna go to my desktop. And I'll show you some of the CLI experience for working with these projects. If I want to .NET New a Blazor app, Blazor, so we'll call it Blazor app 1. We'll let that be created. Okay, and if we go in there, we can .NET run the Blazor app, and let's just make sure that is working. I'll pop up a browser here so that we can see that once it's going. I think it'll probably be on localhost 5001. So it's thinking. You gonna run? Thinking? My poor machine. It's got Teams going and all this VS instances. What's going on? Come on. Restoring packages. There it goes. Wow. I don't know what happened there. That was a really long time. This is where people usually say, Dan, you need a new laptop. Okay, so it looks like it's running though, and we download. Yeah, so we got just a vanilla Blazor application. Okay, great. So let's stop that and clear this out. And now, you know what I wanted to do? Actually, I want a solution, and I don't want to have to create the solution myself. So let me pop up here. I'm going to .NET New a Blazor hosted application. That's what I really wanted. Blazor hosted app 1. So this is the same app, but instead of just being a standalone Blazor app, it's actually hosted in an ASP.NET Core project. That will give us a 2-project, or actually a 3-project-based solution. And then we can start adding things to that. If I run this project, you'll see exactly the same thing as what we just saw. That I'll set up. And then let's add a class library to it with some components that we want to be able to use. They're storing everything. That looks great. Okay, let's go into our Blazor host. That's what we want to use. And let's .NET new a Blazor lib. A Blazor class library is just a normal .NET standard class library that is set up with the Razor SDK so it can compile Razor components, and it also has some of the infrastructure for dealing with static assets like JavaScript files or CSS files or images, stuff that you might want to carry with your component class library that those components are using. Okay, so if we look at this, so now we've got our Blazor lib project alongside our Blazor hosted project. So let's add it to the solution. So .NET solution add Blazor lib. Okay, good. And then I'm going to reference this Blazor lib from the app, from the part that actually has the Razor components in it. So .NET add to, what is it, the .client project. Yeah, add to the .client project a reference to Blazor lib 1. All right, cool. And now we should be all set. So let's look at the code for this real quick. And we do need to do one little gesture in order to use the components in Blazor lib. Let's look at what the components are doing. So here we are. And there we go. Okay, so let's see what we got here. So we've got a couple of projects. We've got client, server, shared, and Blazor lib. Like before, server is the ASP.NET Core project. Client is the one that has the actual Razor components in it. And then lib is down below. It has a single component in it, component 1, which just has a div. There's nothing really interesting going on with it. But it does have some a class on it, a CSS class.
Can I bug you to bump up the font just a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
There we go. Yep.
That.
Yeah, much better.
Much better. All right, great. Whoa, too big.
Whoa.
Okay. So it has this content folder also with some styles in it that styles that particular class. It has some JavaScript in it that we can call for JavaScript interop purposes, and it has a background image for that component as well. So these are all static assets that will get compiled into Blazor lib 1. They get embedded as like embedded resources. So I can just reference the package, and then there's build infrastructure in Blazor and Razor Components apps for extracting those assets so that they then get served as static files from your application. Okay, so I want to use component 1 in my app. How do I do that? So let me go to my app, and in here I'm going to go into the view imports file, and I'm going to add. This is kind of a ugly hack just for now. This will change, but for right now you have to say add tag helper star Blazor 1. This is currently how we discover components in other class libraries. So this basically says, like, I want to grab all the components from Blazor lib 1. In the future, the way we plan to do this is just by namespaces. Like if the class that defines the component is in scope in terms of its namespace, like if there's a using statement that brings it in, then that component will be in scope. That's how that will work going forward. But for right now, you have to do this add tag helper thing. And then now that I've done that, I should be able to go into my index page and add a component. I should be able to go component 1. And now let's run this and see if that shows up. So we've got to run the server project. It's the way hosted templates work. And let's see if this works. Oh, again, that slow startup time. I'm not sure what's going on with my machine. For it to pop up. Come on. Woo!
We've got some questions stacking up too. Whenever's a good point to stop for some questions.
Well, while we're waiting for it.
Awesome. Let's do this. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me see. So just to echo it, we answered the question in the chat, but David Pine was asking if people can add things to the community page. And those are all docfx. So there's an improve this doc link on everyone that you can click through.
Yeah, like you just go here. You see this link right there? click the improve this doc link, send us a PR. We love hearing about community work that people are doing. And just edit this page, put your either your sample project or your library in the right spot, send us a PR, and we'll be happy to pull it in.
Cool. Let me see. Question from Rest here. Will it be possible to run client and server-side models in the same app? So I think that the idea there is you have a shared project, right?
So finally, man, I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, so the app's running now. But so I think what that's saying is, like, can you have like server-side Razor components where you're like, have a connection, you're dealing with your UI server-side, and then also have client-side Blazor? I think that's what they're asking, like pieces that actually are run completely in the browser. And the answer is yeah, that should work. You basically would just take different parts of your app and say, like, this part I want to be server-side Razor components, and this part I want to be client-side Blazor, and that should work fine. I mean, when you think about Blazor is fully client-side. It's just a bunch of static files that get downloaded into the browser. It has no clue really what's running on the server. You download the runtime, you fire up the runtime, you download the DLLs, you execute the DLLs all in the browser, and as far as it knows, you could be running Node or PHP or Python or whatever on the server, and it doesn't care. When you're hosting Blazor in an ASP.NET Core app, all the ASP.NET Core app is really doing is providing static file hosting for those Blazor client files. So that part should work fine. You can have part of your app that is, being handled completely on the server. Then you also download a runtime and run some code on the client to do some stuff. That should be totally cool. But let me jump back to this. So let's get the app spun up. So this should look just like before, except now we should have a new component on the homepage, and there it is. And you'll notice that it's picking up the background styling of this component is using the image that was from that component library, and this red dotted line, that was one of the styles that came from the CSS file that was in the component class library as well. One little caveat on this experience that I will highlight for Preview 2 and Preview 2 only. This static file infrastructure that I just showed you here currently only works for Blazor projects. It's not working yet for Razor component projects. So if I tried to do this same demo, but instead of referencing component 1 from a Blazor project, I reference it from a Razor component project, the static files wouldn't get picked up. You would still see the component. The component stuff would work because the component model is the same, but we haven't done the work yet to like pull over the JavaScript files and the CSS files and stuff that are embedded in the assembly. That's just a point in time limitation.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So back over here. So then if you want to create your own Razor Components apps, you can do that in VS. Just file a new project and away you go, and this thing will then run. And the really cool stuff is that all of the component model pieces are now part of ASP.NET Core. Like this ASP.NET Core components.server, that's where the component model that originally shipped as this experimental thing in Blazor is now shipping as part of the product.
Okay.
So pretty excited about that.
So as part of that, a lot of questions on like, clarify what this means. Can I use this now? When's it shipping? When's, what's released? When's, like timelines?
Great question. Okay, so for timelines, the stuff that's in .NET Core 3.0, which is the stuff I was showing you in Visual Studio 2019, like this project and the ability to create Razor components and run them server-side, use them with Azure SignalR service, that is shipping with 3.0. It's in the box already. It will ship with 3.0. So we just shipped Preview 2. We are planning to ship previews about, once a month. And then we're looking at maybe a fall-ish release, probably for 3.0. I don't know that we've made any public commitment yet as to exactly when 3.0 will ship, but that's roughly when I would expect 3.0 to land. So server-side support for Razor components, shipping, and you can plan to use it in production. You can think about writing real web apps with it. That's no longer experimental. That is something that you can take a bet on now. Blazor is hosting those same Razor components, but hosting them in the browser. That's the part that is not yet, that is not committed to ship with 3.0. We are planning to continue to work on Blazor in parallel with 3.0. So every time we ship a .NET Core 3.0 release, like Preview 2, Preview 3, etc., we are planning to ship a Blazor update that uses the new Razor components improvements that we made for that release, because Blazor will now depend on the Razor component model in .NET Core 3.0. So we'll continue to work on Blazor in the same time frame, but it's not going to ship in 3.0. It'll ship sometime later. We do plan to ship it. We just don't have a concrete ship date yet. We don't have a full roadmap as to when that will land. The big work item there, honestly, is finishing up the WebAssembly runtime. There's a lot of stuff still to do there. Like, we've been talking about debugging. The debugging is still a pretty rough experience. We want that to be really good. We need to finish fleshing out the .NET standard support in the WebAssembly runtime. We need to improve performance. We need to do work on the download size of the WebAssembly runtime. Those are all things that are in progress. We're actively working on them, but they're not going to be done in time for the 3.0 release. At least we don't expect them to be. So sometime later, exactly when is what we're working on right now to figure out. Doing the costing exercises and trying to put a date out there as to when we can commit to have this done.
So one nice thing, as far as you pointed out, I can if I'm expecting, if I'm planning on shipping something that's Blazor WebAssembly based, I can build stuff using Razor components and the kind of supported 3.0 timeline thing, and then flip it over to Blazor front end when that goes. And that's kind of a nice model, right? That unblocks me from.
That is very intentional too. Like some people will ask me about the Razor component model, like the server side model, and they'll be like, I don't know about the server side model if that's really for me. I mean, there are some trade-offs with the model, like you have to have a connection. There's no offline support. You're paying for it on the server, like you're running all the components server side, so you've got to pay that cost of hosting that additional load. A lot of people are like, I really prefer to have the client-side model. And the answer for those people is yes. Server-side Razor components is on the path to get us to the client. It enables us to ship the component model and the tooling well in advance of when the WebAssembly runtime is actually ready. And once that WebAssembly runtime is ready, we can ship Blazor as a client-side framework. And then now if you want to take your Razor components, server-side based apps, and move them to be a Blazor app, you can do so. It's literally the same component model. One of the demos we often do is like taking a Razor components app, starting out as Razor components and then flipping it to be a Blazor app just by changing a line of code. And like we talked about earlier, a lot of people do that in development.
So Christopher has been patiently asking several times about the pre-rendering branch. He's been following that and a question on when that'll be semi-alpha or whatever. I guess there's a pre-rendering branch in the Blazor repo. Yeah.
So some of it is already in, and you can play around with it. I don't even have it in the thing. So in preview 2, we didn't make a lot of noise about this quite yet, just because the experience is still a little rough. But we did add support in preview 2 for rendering, pre-rendering components like into an MVC view or a Razor page. We want to have an integration story there where if you already have an MVC app or a Razor Pages-based application, that doesn't mean you have to now like throw everything away and start again if you want to start using Razor components. You can use Razor components side by side with MVC and Razor Pages, and in fact, we will enable you to use your components within a view or a Razor page. We want that experience to be that you just use normal component syntax within a view or page to render a component. Right now, it doesn't quite look like that. Like I wish I had it. I'm not going to try and set this up on the fly, but as an example, this is a Razor component file, so it doesn't even really completely make sense. But the syntax looks something like you have HTML dot like render component async, I think is what it is, and then you specify the component that you want. Like let's say I put a counter here, and then of course this isn't even real Razor syntax in this file, but right. You get the idea. And then you put parameters here, like parameters that you want to pass into the component to say, hey, I want to render a counter here, and here's the parameters I want to pass to the counter when I render it. That does work in Preview 2, and what that will do is it will take the component, render it, run it to render HTML into that page or view at that point, which is effectively a pre-rendering of the component. What it doesn't do yet is it won't wire up interactivity. Like if you actually did this with a counter component and tried to click the count button, it doesn't know how to yet establish a connection back to that component so that when the click button event happens in the browser, it gets pumped back to the server and then refreshes runs a new render and pushes a diff down and updates again. So that it's only the first pre-rendering that's currently implemented, but we want to have full interactivity wire up done as well so that you can use any Razor component from any page or view. It's really early right now, but there is some stuff in the bits. If you want to see a full demo of that flow, again, I'd point you to Steve Sanderson's Blazor talk at NDC London. He did show the this model for doing pre-rendering, and it's pretty cool.
Cool. So there's I think a really interesting question that kind of explains some stuff. Well, Reza is asking if Razor components are SEO friendly, and if I can take my guess at this, because it's using standard HTML, JavaScript, CSS on the front end, it's standard. Like, so this is not like the Silverlight Flash plugin component model sort of thing. This is standard HTML on the front end that, for the most part, could be SEO friendly, right?
So the SEO friendly part will come in once we have the full pre-rendering stack in place. Because what you need is you need a web crawler to be able to make a request to the site and just pull down some HTML and be able to index it, right?
Right.
With the Razor Components app, at least right now, that's not what will happen. Like you'll pull down some like root HTML and some JavaScript, and then the JavaScript will establish a SignalR connection, and it will run the components on the server, and then pull down what the DOM updates should be, and then the page actually renders, which is not what you want for SEO. But with the pre-rendering work that was mentioned previously, that first hit will actually be a full render, and then the connectivity will be established after the fact in the background so that user interactivity can then be established.
Cool. And there's a few questions on the size of the download, like what's going on, like how small is it and how small can we get it and that kind of thing.
So right now with Razor components, the download size you're looking at is about 100 kilobytes for the app. I believe most of that payload is coming from Bootstrap and the components.server.js file that we download to set up the SignalR connection along with the SignalR client code. So much lighter. The Blazor client apps right now are weighing in at about 2 megabytes compressed when you create a new Blazor project. The bulk of that size is coming from the WebAssembly runtime itself. Like the WASM file is about 700 kilobytes compressed. Then you have like the core BCL assemblies, like MS Core Lib effectively and System Core and those types of assemblies. Those guys are the next heavyweights in the payload. Things that we're doing in the Blazor world to trim down size, like we already run the app through an IL linker to strip out unused IL. That helps with the assemblies. And that happens on every build. Like you just build the Blazor app and it will strip out unused IL. So there's things that we can do to try and make the core libraries that are downloaded more linker friendly. It doesn't help with the WebAssembly file though. The WebAssembly file obviously isn't IL, so running an IL linker on it doesn't do anything. There's still the potential to dig into the WebAssembly file and find pieces of the runtime that actually are kind of left over from other platforms that we support with the same runtime that actually aren't used in the browser. Like there may be debugging infrastructure in there that doesn't apply to running in the browser. Those types of things. There may be opportunity to try and take a scalpel through the WebAssembly file a bit more and trim it back. We still hope to try and get that app to be closer to 1 megabyte in size total download by the time we ship Blazor. Remains to be seen if we get there. I mean, we haven't made a lot of progress recently in terms of size reduction. In fact, where we've made more progress actually is in performance. Blazor performance right now isn't fantastic in the browser, in part because you're running on an IL interpreter. The WebAssembly file you're downloading isn't going to try and JIT the downloaded IL to WebAssembly. It'll just interpret the raw IL directly, which is great for having a fast developer workflow, but not so great if you want to do like CPU-intensive workloads directly in the browser. So the Mono team has been working very hard on ahead-of-time compilation support for Blazor, where they can take chunks of like the BCL or of the app and just go ahead and compile those parts to WebAssembly, leave other parts that are iterating faster and maybe aren't as performance sensitive, leave those as just normal .NET IL, and then you have this nice balance of fast performance for the parts that need to be fast. Like those parts can just be raw WebAssembly, but still get fast iterative developer workflow for stuff that you're like coding on.
Cool. Let me see. Several questions on when can we get at that NDC London video. And as far we don't have a date. I mean, it's an NDC conference when they release them.
They usually take a week or two, I think, but they're usually pretty good about getting them out. You can watch that as well. Yeah.
Cool. Interesting discussion. Faisal is asking, is Blazor going to replace JavaScript? I feel like it's easy to, I think people like to turn this into a one thing versus another thing. And I love just having a tool, I'm mostly a .NET developer. I love web technologies too. And if there's stuff that makes more sense for, it's nice to have a tool. If I want to use Blazor and C# to write some front end stuff, that's great, And I talk to a lot of mostly .NET ASP.NET backend developers that occasionally have to write like some Angular or React, and they don't feel comfortable with it, and they don't really know what they're doing, and they're like, well, I just got to do it because I got to write this front end heavy app. Heck, man, that sounds great for a Blazor app,
The way I often think about it is like it's not so much that like Blazor or WebAssembly stops people from keeps people from running JavaScript. What it does is it expands the ecosystem that you have available to you when you're writing web apps. And you can, of course, write JavaScript, and you can continue to write JavaScript. And JavaScript has got its strengths, and it's got a phenomenal ecosystem and community. And I'm sure people will be writing JavaScript for many years to come, just like people write C and C++ and probably even assembly code like they have for many years, despite the advent of things like Java and .NET and Python and other managed languages. But in addition to writing JavaScript now, you can now use all these other cool tools and languages and frameworks that you could never use before. You can use .NET. If you want to use Go or Rust or Java or whatever in the browser, that is now possible thanks to this new open web standard, thanks to WebAssembly. I do think there are a bunch of people today that are writing JavaScript that would probably prefer not to be, like you were saying, like they maybe have to occasionally dabble in Angular, React, or whatever, and they're like, I've got to do this because I have no other option. Well, now at least those people will now have that other option. Whatever platform it is that they prefer, they can now use that platform. If they prefer writing in JavaScript, they will, of course, continue to write in JavaScript, and that's totally fine. There's nothing about this that removes the capability to write JavaScript. It expands the ecosystem, which I think is great.
And like a thing that you showed earlier was that using that ML, trained library. And I think that is a really key thing too, is if you have NuGet packages and libraries that you are used to and work, like no need to go find a JavaScript or TypeScript equivalent. Like you can go and start using all your NuGet packages and your shared libraries and all that stuff. You can use those on the client, which is pretty amazing,
Yeah, like so, we've done a demo. I mean, I could probably, well, I don't know. We're kind of close at a time, but one fun demo is generating a full Excel spreadsheet from the browser using just .NET code. Like it's actually surprisingly easy to do. There's existing NuGet package out there. I think it's called EP+. It's fairly popular. It's got like 5 million downloads, and it's a .NET library for generating full Excel spreadsheets, like charts and conditional formatting, and it works in a Blazor app. You can file a new project, create a Blazor app. You can put a button on like the fetch data page, and then just write some normal .NET code to generate an Excel spreadsheet, all running in the browser, and then download it from the browser. And it's awesome. Like it's just simple. You can use the tools that you're familiar with as a .NET developer.
Scott Hunter did a demo at Connect in December that blew my mind, and I think it was tic-tac-toe from a WinForms application, and it was built component based. And so he brought that over to Blazor, and running it in the browser, and it's like, but it's because component-based .NET code like ported relatively easily. So
yeah, it was the same. It was the same app logic with a WinForms front end and a Blazor front end. Same .NET code running both applications.
Crazy.
So speaking of which, I've been sitting on this, and I was hoping I could just hit the button live while we're on the air, but I've been sitting on this little V6 right here for the morning, and I'm just waiting for NuGet to update. I don't know if you've noticed, but I keep refreshing.
Yes.
Hoping that this package is going to show up live. It hasn't shown up quite yet. That's an older version of the Blazor package. We are planning to ship Blazor 0.8 today. As soon the packages are all done, the V6 is all done. I've got the blog post queued up. That should be going live momentarily. As soon as the NuGet indexes have updated with the packages, we will be shipping that. Blazor 0.8, what does it give you? It is basically Blazor now re-implemented on Razor components from the .NET Core 3.0 release. And then it has some updated mono bits in it as well that have improved performance and an improved IL linker. Like now in a Blazor 0.8 app, if you want to use JSON.NET just as is, we've had issues with that for a while because the IL linker would like strip out parts of the BCL that JSON.NET actually needed. That's now all fixed, so you can just use JSON.NET. I even tried using the ASP.NET Web API client package, which gives you like the read as of T, helper methods, and stuff like that. That all works just seamlessly now with Blazor 0.8 in the browser. That should be shipping later today. Look for the blog post.
Can you like preview the blog post for us? Or is it, I mean, I want to give some excitement to the.
Where is it? I think I've got it here someplace.
I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but I totally want to put you on the spot.
Okay. So most of the blog post is the steps that you'll for updating existing projects to the Blazor 0.8 APIs, because we've moved from Microsoft ASP.NET Core.Blazor whatever to Microsoft ASP.NET Core.Components for a lot of the packages. But this is the blog post that will be going live shortly. You need to get the .NET Core 3.0 SDK, Visual Studio 2019, and the latest Blazor extension from the VS Gallery. You only need that now actually for the templates. To get the Blazor templates to show up in VS, you don't need it for any additional tooling. The tooling for Razor components is now in Visual Studio 2019. It's in the box. It's part of the general Razor tooling, so it's no longer some sideshow. And then we'll have all the instructions here on the updates that you need to make to your existing 0.7 apps to update them to 0.8. And it's mostly just switching around packages and updating namespaces and some type name updates. So that is all here.
I'm holding up my lighter here for the Blazor post, just showing my support.
Yeah. The tooling we talked about the tooling updates here, runtime improvements. Here's JSON.NET, working seamlessly in a Blazor app with no modification needed, no IL linker config needed. It's just the normal stuff. And as always, let us know what you think. There will be a link to a survey in the templates that we'd love to hear what you think about Blazor.
Okay, so for people that are excited about this, obviously the huge call to action here, watch for that Blazor release. We'll tweet it from @ASP.NET. It'll be on the social medias and stuff. What's the best way for people to kind of keep involved and keep up to date with what's going on in Blazor land?
Okay, so there's a bunch of ways that you can stay involved. You can watch our check-ins and code as we work on Blazor. All the code now is actually in the main ASP.NET Core repo. So if you go to github.com, ASP.NET Core, we used to be in our own separate repo, right? Like Blazor was this experimental project, so it had its own repo and its own docs page and such. All the Blazor code and Razor components code now just lives in the main ASP.NET Core repo. Look under source, components. It's all here. This is all stuff right here in the main repo, including the Blazor bits. It's in the main line. So you can follow along here, watch issues, watch the pull requests coming in. There's also the Blazor Gitter, which is really great. If you haven't joined us there It's pretty fun. Lots of people are pretty active on this Gitter chat room, talking about Blazor, talking about community projects that they're working on. I try to hang out here as much as possible. So this is a great place to just chat about what's going on with Blazor. And then the docs also, this is kind of interesting. We have just recently started moving the docs into the main ASP.NET Core docs. So before, if you wanted docs, you would go to blazor.net. And you still can't go to blazor.net. That's totally fine. But when you click on the docs link now, instead of taking you to GitHub's pages, this will now pop you over to the main ASP.NET Core documentation, where you can learn all about Razor components and how to build your first Razor components app.
Wow, that is a beautiful homepage, by the way, on that Blazor site.
John, who could have done that? John may have helped me a little bit.
So bad. Awesome. Well, this is so exciting. I am super happy to see the continued progress. Congratulations to you and the team. And thank you for the last minute. I literally pinged you like last night, and it was like, or yesterday afternoon. It was like, hey, neat stuff last week at NDC London. Want to show it off? And so thank you for being a good sport and jumping right in.
I was sitting next to my phone wondering, when is John going to call me? When's he going to call me? I hope he calls me. No problem, John. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks a bunch. I think we can, I think I hear Gulnaz in the room, and she can, I don't know, do whatever she does. Hooray! Thank you, Gulnaz. So I guess we're done. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Ever do a zoom out? I don't know.
Yeah.